A mysterious arrival. The icy winds of Kepler 28 bits howled through the night, carrying with them a biting cold that could freeze a man in minutes. The human outpost sat in the middle of this barren wasteland, its metal walls groaning under the pressure of the relentless storm. Inside, Captain Ethan paced the control room, his boots clanking against the steel floor. He was a man of action, hardened by years of surviving on the edge of the galaxy. Yet tonight, something felt different, like the storm carried a secret waiting to be revealed. "Sir, we've got an anomaly," a young technician called out, his voice cutting through the hum of machinery. Ethan snapped out of his thoughts and moved swiftly to the console. On the screen, a blinking red dot approached their position at an alarming speed. "What is it?" Ethan asked, leaning over the console. His voice was calm but commanding. "Unidentified object, Captain." "It's not one of ours," the technician replied, his hands trembling slightly. "It's heading straight for us." Ethan narrowed his eyes, studying the trajectory. "Prepare the perimeter defenses. If it's hostile, we won't let it get close." But before the crew could act, a deafening explosion rocked the outpost. The ground shook violently, throwing people off their feet. Alarms blared as emergency lights bathed the room in a flashing red glow. "Report," Ethan barked, steadying himself against the wall. "It's crashed," another crew member shouted. 2 clicks east of the outpost. Ethan didn't wait for further explanation. He grabbed his coat and weapon, signaling for his team to follow. "Let's move. If something survived that crash, we need to know what it is." The storm raged as Ethan and his team trudged through the snow, their flashlights cutting narrow beams through the darkness. The air was heavy with tension. Every step brought them closer to the crash site, the metallic scent of burning fuel now mixing with the frozen air. "There it is," someone whispered. The team stopped at the edge of a shallow crater. In the center lay a small alien ship, its surface scorched and twisted from the crash. Sparks flew from broken panels, and faint wisps of smoke rose into the night sky. It didn't look like any ship Ethan had seen before, and he had seen plenty in his years on the frontier. "Stay sharp," Ethan said, his hand tightening around his weapon. He motioned for the others to spread out and approach cautiously. As they neared the wreckage, a soft sound reached Ethan's ears, a faint, rhythmic clicking, like the ticking of a clock. He held up a hand, signaling for silence. The team froze, their breath visible in the cold air. The sound grew louder, and then it stopped. A sudden movement inside the wreckage made everyone jump. Ethan aimed his weapon at the opening, his heart pounding. "Come out. We know you're in there." For a moment, there was no response. Then, slowly, a figure emerged from the shadows of the ship. It was a woman, or at least she looked like one. Her skin glowed faintly, casting a soft golden light against the darkness. Her eyes, large and piercing, seemed to see straight through Ethan. She was tall and thin, her movements graceful despite the obvious pain etched across her face. "Help me," she whispered in a broken voice, her words struggling to form. She staggered forward, clutching her side. Ethan noticed her hands were covered in a strange, shimmering liquid, her blood perhaps. "Who are you?" Ethan demanded, not lowering his weapon. "What do you want?" The woman fell to her knees, gasping for air. "No time," she said, her voice barely audible. "They are coming. They will kill you all." Her words sent a chill down Ethan's spine, colder than the storm itself. "Who's coming? What are you talking about?" She looked up at him, desperation filling her glowing eyes. "I need you," she said, her voice trembling. "Your body, your strength. You must become my mate." Ethan froze, stunned by her words. Around him, his team exchanged confused and alarmed glances. The woman collapsed fully onto the snow, her glowing skin dimming like a dying ember. Before Ethan could respond, the ground beneath them began to tremble. It was faint at first, but it grew stronger with each passing second. A low, rumbling sound echoed through the night, coming from somewhere far off, but moving closer. "Captain, we need to get out of here," one of his men shouted. But Ethan didn't move. He stared at the woman lying in the snow, her breathing shallow, her words replaying in his mind. She needed him. He didn't understand why or how, but something about her felt important. The rumbling grew louder. Whatever was coming was massive. And it wasn't friendly. "Grab her," Ethan ordered, slinging his weapon over his shoulder. "We're taking her back to the outpost." "Sir, are you sure? We don't even know what she is," one of his team protested. Ethan didn't reply. He bent down and lifted the woman into his arms. Her body was lighter than he expected, almost as if she were made of air. Her eyes fluttered open briefly, and she whispered one last word before losing consciousness. "Run." And run they did. Behind them, the shadows of monstrous shapes emerged on the horizon, their forms illuminated by flashes of lightning. The hunters had arrived, and Ethan's life was about to change forever. A dangerous pursuit. The outpost doors slammed shut behind them, sealing out the biting cold and the encroaching storm. Ethan, his breath ragged, laid the unconscious alien woman on the steel table in the medbay. Her glowing skin flickered faintly like a dying flame, and her shallow breathing made it clear she wouldn't last long without help. "Who is she? What does she want?" asked Lieutenant Harris, Ethan's second-in-command. His voice was tinged with both curiosity and fear. "I don't know," Ethan replied, rubbing his temples. "But she's terrified of something, and whatever it is, it's headed for us." Harris frowned, glancing at the monitor showing blurry images of the snowstorm outside. "Captain, we should have left her. She's a liability." Ethan turned to face him, his eyes sharp. "She's a sentient being. We're not leaving anyone out there to die. Not when she warned us about what's coming." Before Harris could argue further, a loud alarm pierced the air. The technician's voice crackled over the intercom. "Captain, we've got incoming. Unidentified hostiles. 3 clicks and closing fast." Ethan rushed to the control room, Harris on his heels. The radar display showed 6 large blips moving in perfect formation, each one far too fast and precise to be natural. "They're not ships," the technician said, his voice trembling. "They're something else." "Visual feed now," Ethan barked. The screen flickered to life, revealing dark, hulking shapes moving swiftly through the storm. Their silhouettes were monstrous, blending mechanical precision with a predator's grace. They were hunting, no doubt about it. "Activate the perimeter defenses," Ethan ordered. "Turrets online. I want every shield and barricade up now." In the medbay, the alien woman stirred, her golden eyes fluttering open. She winced in pain as she struggled to sit up. A medic tried to steady her, but she pushed him away weakly, her gaze darting around the room until it locked onto Ethan, who had just entered. "They are here," she said in a hoarse voice. Her words were clearer now, but still carried an alien accent. "You cannot stop them. They will not stop until they take me." "Then you'd better start talking," Ethan said, his tone firm but not unkind. "Who are they? Why are they after you?" The woman hesitated, her luminous skin flickering weakly. "They are my kind," she admitted, lowering her gaze. "But they are no longer alive. Machines now, twisted by greed and war. I followed because I would not become like them." Ethan's jaw tightened. He had heard stories of advanced species falling to their own creations, but seeing the results up close was something else entirely. "Why do they want you?" "I carry the key," she said, clutching her chest. "Inside me is a code they need, a genetic sequence to complete their transformation. If they capture me, they will destroy this galaxy." The ground trembled violently as the first of the hunters reached the outpost. A deafening crash echoed through the halls as one of the creatures slammed into the outer walls. The sound of metal bending under immense pressure made everyone freeze. Then came the unmistakable hum of energy weapons charging. Ethan grabbed his rifle, signaling for his crew to prepare for combat. Whatever they want, they're not getting it. We hold the line. Area, she had finally told them her name, shook her head, struggling to rise from the medbay table. You don't understand, she said. These walls will not hold them. You cannot fight them. The only way to survive is to run. And leave the outpost defenseless. Not a chance, Ethan shot back. Aria's glowing eyes flared briefly, her frustration evident. If you stay, you die. If they capture me, you die. There is no choice here. You must listen to me. The walls shook again, harder this time, and sparks flew from the ceiling as the lights flickered. A voice came through the intercom. Captain, the perimeter defenses are down. They're breaking through. Ethan cursed under his breath. Time was running out. Turning back to Aria, he asked, if we run, where do we go? How do we outrun them? There is a valley to the west, Aria said, her voice urgent. The storm will mask our trail, but I will need your help. My help. Ethan's brow furrowed. What are you talking about? Aria hesitated, as if searching for the right words. Your kind, your body. It carries the strength I need to heal. Without it, I will not survive the journey. Ethan stared at her, unsure of how to respond. Around them, the outpost creaked under the relentless assault. Time was slipping away, and the situation was growing more desperate by the second. Captain, we need to decide now, Harris shouted. Ethan clenched his fists. There was no time to debate. He glanced at Aria, whose glowing skin was dimming by the moment, then back at the terrified faces of his crew. Finally, he made his decision. Pack what you can carry, Ethan ordered. We're leaving. The escape was chaos. Ethan and his team loaded supplies onto hover sleds as the hunters breached the outer walls. Their hulking forms moved with terrifying speed, their glowing red eyes scanning for prey. Aria, too weak to walk, clung to Ethan as he carried her through the snowstorm. Blaster fire lit up the darkness as the crew fought off the attackers, but the hunters were relentless. One by one, they fell behind, consumed by the enemy. Ethan's chest burned with rage and grief, but he kept moving. He had to. Ahead, the jagged cliffs of the western valley loomed through the storm, promising temporary refuge. But the hunters were closing in, their guttural roars echoing through the frozen night. Faster, Aria whispered, her voice faint. They are almost here. As the first of the hunters lunged forward, Ethan spun around, raising his weapon. But before he could fire, Aria's body glowed brightly, and a sudden wave of energy erupted from her, sending the creature sprawling. The burst left Aria limp in Ethan's arms, her glow fading to almost nothing. What was that? Harris asked, his voice filled with awe and fear. Ethan shook his head. I don't know, but whatever she is, she's our only chance now. The group vanished into the valley, leaving the ruined outpost behind. But the hunters would not stop. They never stopped. Ethan knew this was just the beginning of a much larger fight. The bonding ritual. The group huddled inside a narrow cave carved into the icy cliffs of the valley. Outside, the storm roared, masking their presence from the hunters for now. The glow from Aria's skin was almost gone, replaced by a pale, grayish hue. Her breathing was shallow, and she shivered uncontrollably despite the thermal blankets wrapped around her. Ethan crouched next to her, his jaw clenched. You said they wouldn't stop. That this is only the beginning. What did you mean? Aria's golden eyes flickered open, dim and unfocused. Her voice was barely a whisper. They are linked. One mind, many bodies. If one finds us, all will come. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Harris broke the silence. Captain, how do we even fight something like that? We can't run forever. Ethan didn't answer. His gaze stayed on Aria. She was deteriorating fast, and he knew she didn't have much time. His gut told him that whatever strength she had left could be the key to their survival. The truth about the bond. Arya stirred, her fragile voice cutting through the tension. There is one way, but it is not without cost. Ethan leaned closer, his expression hard but curious. Talk. Quickly. Arya's eyes met his, a flicker of determination in their fading light. My kind were once like you. Strong. Independent. But the war, it changed us. To survive, we became something else. We learned to bond. To share strength. Ethan frowned. What kind of bond? Our bodies, she said, struggling to sit up. Our essence. When I fled, I carried with me the last untainted code of my kind. It can merge with yours, create a union. I will live, and you will gain what I have lost. You're saying you want to turn me into one of you? Ethan asked, his tone sharp. Not entirely, Arya replied, her voice soft but urgent. You will remain human, but enhanced, stronger, faster. Your body will adapt to the hunter's technology. Together, we can fight them. Without the bond, I will die. And you will fall when they come. A desperate gamble. Harris stepped forward, his face twisted with anger. Captain, this is insane. She's asking you to. What? Merge with her? For all we know, this is a trap. Ethan raised a hand, silencing him. She hasn't hurt us. If she wanted to, she could have done it back at the outpost. Arya's voice broke through the argument, low and desperate. There is no time to debate. The hunters will find us. They always do. If we bond, we can fight. If we don't. She didn't finish the sentence, but the silence that followed spoke volumes. Ethan looked around the cave. His crew, battered and terrified, were counting on him to lead. He didn't trust Arya fully, but his instincts told him she wasn't lying about the hunters. They needed an edge. He turned to her, his jaw set. What do I have to do? The ritual begins. Arya's face softened with relief, but her movements were slow and deliberate as she extended her trembling hand toward Ethan. Take my hand. You must allow the bond. Do not resist. Ethan hesitated for only a second before gripping her hand. Her skin was cold, almost metallic, but as their hands touched, a warmth spread through him, growing hotter by the second. He winced as a sharp pain shot up his arm, followed by a flood of light in his vision. His knees buckled, and he fell, his mind overwhelmed by a rush of alien sensations. He felt like he was falling through endless space, surrounded by fragments of memories that weren't his. He saw glimpses of Arya's life, her people's rise and fall, the horrors of the war, and the hunters' relentless transformation into soulless machines. Arya's voice echoed in his mind, calm but urgent. Focus, Ethan. Your mind must accept the connection. If you fight it, the bond will fail. Gritting his teeth, Ethan pushed through the flood of emotions, focusing on the here and now. He could feel his body changing, his muscles tightening, his senses sharpening. But along with the strength came a strange awareness, a link to Arya's thoughts and emotions. When the light faded, Ethan opened his eyes. His crew stared at him, their faces a mix of awe and fear. Captain, Harris said cautiously, you're glowing. Ethan glanced at his hands, now faintly illuminated with the same golden light that had once surrounded Arya. His body felt different, stronger, lighter, more alive. But before he could process the transformation, a low, guttural roar echoed through the valley. The hunters close in. The ground shook as the hunters approached, their massive forms visible now through the storm. The lead creature, larger than the rest, stopped just outside the cave entrance. Its glowing red eyes scanned the area, and its metallic limbs creaked as it moved. Arya staggered to her feet, leaning on Ethan for support. They know, she whispered. They can feel the bond. Good, Ethan said, raising his weapon. His voice was steady, and a new confidence radiated from him. Let's see if they can handle it. The hunters charge, their mechanical bodies moving with terrifying speed. Ethan stepped forward, his enhanced reflexes kicking in. Time seemed to slow as he fired, each shot hitting its mark with unerring precision. The crew followed his lead, their hope rekindled by their captain's newfound strength. But the hunters weren't ordinary enemies. For every one they took down, another emerged, their red eyes glowing with relentless hunger. The crew was running out of ammunition, and the cave offered little protection. The last push. Arya clutched Ethan's arm, her voice weak but determined. There is a weapon, deep in the valley. My ship carries it, but we must reach it. Ethan nodded, his mind already racing. Harris, hold the line. We'll draw them away and circle back. You're leaving us? Harris shouted, disbelief written across his face. I'll come back, Ethan promised, his glowing eyes meeting Harris. Just hold them off. With Arya leaning on him, Ethan sprinted into the storm, the hunters roaring in pursuit. He could feel the bond between them growing stronger, their minds sensing in ways he couldn't fully understand. But one thing was clear, this fight was far from over, and the key to their survival lay somewhere ahead, buried beneath the frozen wasteland of Kepler 28 bits. Escape into the unknown. The wind screamed across the jagged cliffs as Ethan and Arya pressed forward, their silhouettes barely visible against the snowstorm. The hunters' guttural roars echoed behind them, relentless and closing in fast. Ethan's enhanced senses, gifts from the bond, picked up faint tremors in the ground, and the sharp mechanical clicks of the hunters' limbs. They were being tracked like prey. Arya stumbled, her legs giving out beneath her. Ethan caught her, his glowing hands stark against her ashen skin. Her golden light was nearly gone, flickering weakly. I can't. Arya gasped, her voice trembling with exhaustion. I'm slowing you down. Ethan shook his head. Not an option. You're the only chance we have against those things. He tightened his grip around her. We're getting to that ship. Her ship, an ancient vessel buried deep in the frozen valley, was their last hope. It carried a weapon capable of turning the tide, though Arya hadn't explained what it was or how it worked. Ethan had stopped asking questions. Survival was all that mattered now. The hunters closed the gap. Behind them, the hunters advanced with terrifying speed, their metallic frames cutting through the storm like predators on a mission. Ethan felt a new awareness stir within him, a side effect of the bond. He could sense the hunters' movements, almost as if they were broadcasting their intent. It was faint, fragmented, but it gave him an edge. They're splitting up, Ethan muttered, scanning the storm. His eyes glowed faintly in the dark, adjusting to the low light. 3 are flanking us from the cliffs. 2 more are cutting off our path ahead. Arya's head lifted weakly. You can feel them. Yeah, it's like a signal. Ethan frowned. Is this what it's like for you? She nodded, shivering. The bond. It connects us to the grid. You're tuning into their network. But if they sense you on it, they'll adapt. Let them try, Ethan growled, tightening his grip on his weapon. We'll keep moving. Ambush on the cliffs. The valley narrowed into a steep pass, the walls on either side towering like frozen sentinels. It was the perfect place for an ambush, and the hunters knew it. As Ethan and Arya entered the pass, a deafening screech split the air, followed by the sound of heavy metal feet pounding on rock. They're here, Ethan said, raising his weapon. A hunter leaped down from the cliff above, its monstrous body crashing into the snow in front of them. Its red eyes locked onto Ethan, and its blade-like arms extended with a sharp click. Before Ethan could react, another hunter emerged from the shadows behind them, cutting off their escape. Stay behind me, Ethan shouted, pushing Arya toward the cliff wall. The first hunter lunged, but Ethan moved faster than he ever thought possible. His enhanced reflexes allowed him to sidestep the attack and fire a shot straight into the creature's chest. The blast staggered it but didn't take it down. The second hunter charged, swinging its blade at Arya. Ethan spun around, his movements fluid and precise. He intercepted the blow with his weapon, the force of the impact sending vibrations up his arm. He retaliated with a strike of his own, his enhanced strength driving the hunter back. "Ethan!" Arya cried, pointing upward. A third hunter loomed above, ready to pounce. Ethan didn't think, he acted. Grabbing a fallen piece of jagged metal from the snow, he hurled it with all his might. The makeshift weapon struck the hunter square in its glowing red eye, sending it tumbling from the cliff. Breathing heavily, Ethan turned to Arya. "We can't keep this up. Where's the ship?" Arya pointed deeper into the pass, just beyond the ridge. A desperate gamble. The pair continued their escape, but Ethan knew they were running out of time. The hunters weren't just chasing them. They were learning. Each encounter was more coordinated than the last, and their relentless pursuit was wearing Ethan down, even with his enhancements. Arya, sensing his frustration, spoke softly. "You're stronger now, but you're still thinking like them. Reacting. The bond, it gives you more than strength." Ethan glanced at her. "What do you mean?" "Close your eyes," she urged, her voice weak but firm. "Feel the grid. They are part of it, but so are we now." Ethan hesitated but did as she said. At first, all he felt was the cold biting his skin and the roar of the wind. But then, like tuning a radio, he began to sense it, the faint hum of energy that connected the hunters. It was chaotic and alien, but within it, he found patterns, paths. "They're circling around," Ethan said, opening his eyes. "If we had left, we can avoid them." Arya gave a faint smile. "Now you're learning." The ship. They reached the ridge just as the storm began to clear, revealing a massive crater below. In the center, partially buried under centuries of ice, was Arya's ship. Its sleek, organic design was unlike anything Ethan had seen, more alive than machine. Blue light pulsed faintly from its core, as if it were waiting for her. "There," Arya said, her voice filled with relief. "We made it." But their victory was short-lived. A thunderous roar shattered the moment as the hunters emerged from the pass, their leader towering above the rest. It was larger, more advanced, its glowing red eyes filled with cruel intelligence. Ethan's heart pounded. "Go, get to the ship. I'll hold them off." "You can't fight them alone," Arya protested. "Just go," Ethan shouted, raising his weapon. Arya hesitated, then nodded, staggering toward the ship. The hunters charged, their metallic limbs tearing through the snow. Ethan met them head-on, his enhanced strength and reflexes pushing him to the limit. He fought like a man possessed, his movements precise and devastating. But no matter how many he took down, more kept coming. The leader watched from a distance, as if studying him. "Arya," Ethan shouted, glancing back at her. She had reached the ship's entrance, but the doors remained sealed. "I need time," she called back, her hands glowing faintly as she interfaced with the ship. Ethan turned back to the hunters, his body aching, but his resolve unshaken. "Time's something we don't have." A sacrifice. The leader stepped forward, its voice a deep mechanical growl. "Surrender her, and we will spare you." Ethan spat into the snow. Not a chance. The leader tilted its head, as if amused. Then it charged. The impact was like a freight train, sending Ethan flying into the snow. He rolled to his feet, pain radiating through his body, but he refused to back down. This was more than survival now. It was a fight for something bigger. Behind him, the ship roared to life, its blue core shining brightly. Arya's voice echoed in his mind. "Get inside, Ethan. It's ready." He didn't hesitate. With one last burst of strength, he turned and sprinted for the ship, narrowly dodging the hunters' attacks. As he reached the entrance, the doors slammed shut behind him, sealing them inside. The ship's core flared, and Ethan felt a surge of energy unlike anything before. He looked at Arya, who was now standing tall, her strength restored. "This is just the beginning," she said, her golden light returning. The weapon. It's us. Ethan nodded, his glowing hands clenching into fists. The fight wasn't over, but now they had the power to win. A risky decision. Ethan sat on the glowing platform, his breathing steady but laced with tension. The air around him shimmered, humming with raw energy. The ship felt alive, its pulse sensing with his own in an unsettling rhythm. Arya stood before him, her golden light flickering softly, her face calm but resolute. "This is not just a bond of survival," Arya began, her voice steady. "It is a merging of purpose, of existence. You will no longer be only human, just as I am no longer entirely of my kind. The bond will rewrite us both." Ethan's jaw tightened. "What does that mean for me?" "It means you will become something new. You will carry a part of me, and I, a part of you. The hunters will sense this change. They will fear it, but they will also stop at nothing to destroy it." "Terrific," Ethan muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. "So I'll be their prime target." Again, Arya's lips curved into a faint smile. "You were already their target. Now you'll have the strength to fight back." The clock ticks down. Before Ethan could respond, a loud thud reverberated through the ship, followed by a deep mechanical growl. The hunters had reached the crater. The holographic map showed them encircling the vessel, their leader, a massive hulking figure with crimson eyes, taking its position at the front. "They're testing the ship's defenses," Arya said, her voice tense. "It won't hold them for long." Ethan stared at the map, his fists clenching. "Then let's finish this bond. If we're going down, I'm taking as many of them with me as I can." Arya nodded and extended her hand. "Once we begin, there is no turning back. Are you ready?" Ethan took her hand without hesitation. "Do it." The second phase. The moment their hands connected, the ship's core flared with brilliant light, bathing the room in waves of blue and gold. Ethan felt an intense heat surge through his body, as if every cell was being rewritten. His vision blurred, and the walls of the ship seemed to dissolve, replaced by a swirling void of light and sound. He saw flashes of Arya's memories, her homeworld, once lush and vibrant, now reduced to a wasteland of machinery and ash. He felt her pain, her desperation, and her guilt for fleeing, while her people were consumed by the very technology they had created. But then something new emerged. A deep, resonant energy filled the void, a voice without words, a presence that seemed to envelop them both. Ethan realized it wasn't just him and Arya anymore. The ship itself was part of the bond. It wasn't merely a vessel. It was a living entity, ancient and powerful, waiting for the right moment to awaken. "Ethan," Arya's voice echoed in his mind. "Don't fight it. Let it in." He let out a shuddering breath, surrendering to the energy coursing through him. The ship's core pulsed in time with his heartbeat, and he felt his body shift, his muscles strengthening, his senses sharpening. The connection between him and Arya deepened, their thoughts and emotions blending seamlessly. And then everything went still. The awakening. Ethan opened his eyes, the world around him sharper and more vivid than ever before. He could see every detail of the ship's interior, hear the faint hum of its systems, and feel the hunters outside, their movements like distant tremors in his mind. Arya stood before him, her golden light now blazing. She smiled, a mix of relief and awe. It worked. The bond is complete. Ethan rose to his feet, his movements fluid and precise. He felt stronger, faster, and more connected to everything around him. "I feel different, like I'm not just me anymore." "You're more than you were," Arya said, stepping closer. "We're connected now, and through us, the ship has awakened. Its weapon is ready." The weapon unleash. Before they could celebrate, another thud shook the ship, followed by the screech of metal tearing. The holographic map showed the hunters breaching the crater, their leader smashing through the ice with terrifying ease. Ethan turned to Arya. "You said the weapon is tied to the bond. How do we use it?" Area motioned to the core, now spinning with radiant energy. Step into the interface. The ship will guide you. But be warned, using the weapon will drain both of us. You must be careful. Ethan nodded, stepping onto the platform near the core. The moment his hand touched its glowing surface, a surge of power flooded his body. His mind expanded, connecting not just to the ship, but to the entire battlefield outside. He could see the hunters, feel their movements, and anticipate their next moves. The ship's voice, deep and ancient, echoed in his mind. The weapon is ready. Channel the bond. Outside, the hunters began their final assault, their leader charging toward the ship with blinding speed. Ethan closed his eyes, focusing on the energy within him. The bond between him and Area pulsed stronger than ever, and the ship responded, its core flaring with light. A beam of pure energy erupted from the ship, slicing through the storm and striking the hunters with pinpoint accuracy. One by one, they fell, their mechanical bodies disintegrating under the force. But the leader remained, its crimson eyes glowing with rage. "It's adapting," Area warned. "You need more power." Ethan gritted his teeth, pushing himself further. The core pulsed violently, and another blast shot out, this time hitting the leader directly. The force sent it crashing into the ice, but it quickly rose, its body now glowing with an eerie red light. "It's not enough," Ethan shouted. "What do we do?" Area stepped onto the platform beside him, placing her hand over his. "Together," she said. "We finish this, together." Their combined energy surged through the ship, and the core released a final devastating wave of light. The blast enveloped the crater, obliterating the hunters and their leader in a blinding explosion. The aftermath. When the light faded, the crater was silent, the hunters reduced to smoldering fragments. Inside the ship, Ethan collapsed to his knees, his body trembling with exhaustion. Area knelt beside him, her glow dim but steady. "It's over," she said softly, her hand resting on his shoulder. "We did it." Ethan looked up at her, his eyes still faintly glowing. "For now. But they'll send more, won't they?" Area nodded, her expression somber. "Yes, they always do." Ethan stood, his resolve unshaken. "Then we make sure we're ready for them, whatever it takes." The ship hummed in agreement, its core glowing faintly as it prepared for the battles yet to come. Ethan and Area shared a look. Two lives forever changed, bound by purpose, and ready to face the unknown together. The transformation. The silence in the aftermath was eerie, broken only by the faint hum of the ship's core. Ethan leaned against a console, his breath coming in short, ragged bursts. His body felt alien, stronger, faster, but also unfamiliar. Every movement seemed too precise, as though his muscles knew what to do before his mind did. Area stood beside him, her golden glow dimming slightly, but her eyes burned with determination. She rested a hand on the console, activating a holographic display of the surrounding terrain. The crater was still, littered with the shattered remains of the hunters, their crimson eyes now dark. "They'll regroup," she said, her voice firm. "This wasn't their full force. They sent a scout party to weaken us, to test our capabilities. Now they know what we can do." Ethan straightened, his jaw tightening. "Then we didn't just win. We sent them a message, a new reality." The bond between Ethan and Area had changed more than just their physical capabilities. Ethan could sense Area's thoughts and emotions, faint but clear, as though they shared a silent dialogue. He wasn't sure how he felt about it. This constant connection. It was like having a second heartbeat, one he couldn't shut out. "You're quieter than usual," Area said, glancing at him with a small smile. "I thought humans liked to celebrate their victories." Ethan shrugged, running a hand through his hair. "Hard to celebrate when your body feels like it's not yours anymore." "It is still yours," Area assured him. "But it's more. The bond has integrated you into something greater. Our connection. The ship, the grid. You're evolving." Yeah, that's not exactly comforting, Ethan muttered, flexing his fingers. The faint glow in his skin had faded, but he still felt the lingering energy beneath the surface. And this grid, I can feel it, like static in the back of my mind. It's disorienting. Arya stepped closer, her expression softening. You'll adjust. The grid is not just a tool. It's a living network. You'll learn to filter the noise, to focus only on what matters. For now, trust your instincts. Ethan nodded reluctantly. Instincts had kept him alive this far, and they'd have to guide him through whatever came next. An unexpected transmission. The ship's core pulsed suddenly, and a sharp tone echoed through the chamber. Arya's expression turned grim as she accessed the control panel. A series of alien symbols flashed across the screen, followed by a distorted voice. Mechanical, yet hauntingly familiar. Fugitive detected. Bond confirmed. Target priority escalated. Ethan frowned, stepping closer. Who's broadcasting this? Arya's hands flew over the controls, her golden light flickering with unease. It's the grid. The hunters have connected to it. They're warning their fleet. They know exactly where we are. Ethan cursed under his breath. How long until they get here? Minutes, maybe less, Arya replied. Their signals are fast, and their ships are faster. We can't stay here. Then let's move, Ethan said, grabbing his gear. Where's the nearest safe zone? Arya hesitated. There isn't one. The hunters control most of the system. The only option is to go where they won't expect us. Ethan raised an eyebrow. And where's that? Their stronghold, Arya said, her voice unwavering. Their central hub. If we destroy it, we sever their connection to the grid. Without it, they'll be blind, scattered. Ethan stared at her, disbelief etched on his face. You're suggesting we walk straight into their lair. That's suicide. It's a risk, Arya admitted, but it's our best chance. The ship's weapon is powerful, but it's not infinite. If they overwhelm us with numbers, we'll lose. We have to take out the source. A test of the bond. The ship's thrusters roared to life as they lifted off, leaving the crater behind. Ethan sat in the co-pilot's seat, watching as the barren landscape of Kepler 28 bits blurred beneath them. The storm had cleared, revealing jagged mountains and frozen wastelands stretching endlessly in all directions. As they flew, Ethan could feel the bond pulling at him, his awareness expanding. He could sense the grid more clearly now, a vast network of connections stretching across the system. He could almost pinpoint the location of the hunter's stronghold, as though the knowledge was being fed directly into his mind. You're adapting quickly, Arya said, glancing at him. The grid is recognizing you as part of it. Feels more like it's invading my brain, Ethan muttered. I didn't sign up to be a part-time machine. You're not a machine, Arya said firmly. You're human. The bond enhances what's already there. It doesn't erase it. Ethan sighed, leaning back in his seat. Guess I don't have much of a choice now. The hunters strike back. Before they could continue, the ship shuddered violently. Alarms blared, and the holographic display lit up with dozens of red blips converging on their position. They're here, Arya shouted, gripping the controls. Multiple hunter ships closing in. Ethan sprang into action, manning the weapon systems. The ship's interface responded to his touch, glowing with the same energy he felt coursing through his body. The bond seemed to amplify his reflexes, guiding his hands as he targeted the incoming enemies. The first wave of hunter ships descended like predators, sleek and angular, their energy cannons glowing red. Ethan fired, beams of blue energy cutting through the storm. 2 ships exploded in fiery bursts, but the rest adapted, weaving through the chaos with unnerving precision. They're learning our patterns, Arya warned. We need to outthink them. Ethan gritted his teeth, focusing harder. He let the bond guide him, tapping into the grid's patterns. He could feel the hunters' movements before they happened, predicting their attacks. He fired again, this time taking out 3 ships in quick succession. Arya glanced at him, her expression a mix of surprise and approval. "You're using the grid. You're starting to see it. Let's hope it's enough," Ethan replied, his voice tense. The path forward. The last hunter ship exploded, and the screen cleared. But both Ethan and Arya knew it was only a matter of time before reinforcements arrived. "We can't keep fighting like this," Ethan said, his voice grim. "We need to end this, and fast." Arya nodded. "The stronghold isn't far now. Once we're inside, we'll have one chance to destroy it. If we fail—" "We won't fail," Ethan interrupted, his glowing eyes meeting hers. "Not while I'm still breathing." The ship surged forward, cutting through the icy atmosphere toward the heart of enemy territory. The bond between them pulsed stronger than ever, and Ethan could feel the weight of what was to come. This wasn't just a fight for survival anymore. It was a fight for freedom, for a future worth living. And for the first time, he didn't feel alone. The final stand. The ship broke through the dense clouds, revealing the hunter's stronghold, a colossal structure spanning an entire mountain range. Its jagged spires pierced the sky, radiating an ominous red light. Swarms of hunter drones circled the fortress like mechanical hornets, their movements precise and synchronized. At the center, a massive core pulsed rhythmically, the unmistakable heart of their network. Ethan stood by the viewport, his jaw tightening at the sight. "That's their hive mind, isn't it?" Arya nodded, her golden light flickering with resolve. "The grid core. It's their lifeline. Destroy it, and the hunters lose their connection to each other. Without the grid, they'll revert to mindless machines." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "And the catch?" Arya hesitated. "The core is heavily shielded. The only way to destroy it is to overload the ship's weapon systems, channel all our power into one final blast. But it will leave the ship vulnerable. Once we fire, we'll be sitting ducks." Ethan exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "So it's a one-way trip?" "Not necessarily," Arya said, placing a hand on his shoulder. "If the bond holds, the ship may sustain us long enough to escape, but it will push us both to the limit. If either of us falters, we die," Ethan finished, meeting her gaze. "I got it. Let's do this." The infiltration. As the ship approached the stronghold, the hunters' defenses activated. Beams of energy lanced through the air, narrowly missing the ship as Arya piloted with precision. Ethan manned the weapons, his enhanced reflexes guiding each shot. He could feel the hunters' movements through the grid, predicting their attacks and outmaneuvering them. "We're almost there," Arya called out, her hands flying over the controls. "The core is directly ahead." A massive gate opened in the fortress, and a colossal hunter emerged. Its towering frame bristled with weapons, and its crimson eyes burned with focused rage. "Looks like they sent their champion," Ethan muttered, gripping the controls. "Any bright ideas?" Arya's voice was calm but firm. "Distract it. I'll guide the ship to the core." Ethan smirked. "You say that like it's the easy part." The champion's wrath. The champion unleashed a barrage of plasma bolts, each one shaking the ship violently. Ethan fired back, weaving through the storm of energy. The bond between him and Arya pulsed stronger, amplifying his focus. He could feel the champion's movements, anticipate its attacks, but it wasn't enough. "This thing's learning faster than the others," Ethan shouted. "It's adapting to everything we throw at it." Arya's voice echoed in his mind. "The bond, Ethan. Use it. Let the ship guide you." Ethan closed his eyes, letting go of the controls. The ship responded instantly, its movements fluid and precise. He felt the champion's presence through the grid, a cold, calculating force, and struck where it was weakest. Energy beams tore through its armor, exposing the glowing core within. "Now," Arya shouted. Ethan fired a concentrated blast, and the champion staggered. With one final, desperate shot, the champion's core exploded, sending a shockwave through the fortress. But the ship wasn't unscathed. The blast knocked out its primary engines, and warning lights flared across the control panels. "We're losing power," Arya cried. "We have one shot left. Make it count." The final blast. The ship reached the grid core, a pulsating sphere of energy suspended in a massive chamber. The hunters' drones swarmed around it, their movements frantic as they tried to repair the defenses. Ethan activated the weapon systems, channeling all remaining power into the core. The ship's interior glowed with blinding light, and Ethan felt the bond pulling at him, drawing on his strength. "This is it," Arya said in his mind, her voice steady. "Hold the connection, no matter what." Ethan gritted his teeth, the energy coursing through him like fire. The ship's core flared, and a beam of pure, concentrated energy shot out, striking the grid core. The chamber erupted in chaos as the hunters' network collapsed, their drones falling lifelessly to the ground. But the blast took its toll. The ship shuddered violently, its systems failing one by one. Ethan collapsed to his knees, his body trembling from the strain. "Ethan," Arya cried, rushing to his side. Her golden light enveloped him, stabilizing his failing connection. "Stay with me. The bond is holding. Don't let go." Ethan looked up at her, his vision blurry but determined. "We're not done yet." The escape. The grid core exploded, sending shockwaves through the fortress. The hunter's stronghold began to crumble, its spires collapsing as the network's energy destabilized. Arya dragged Ethan to the pilot's seat, her own strength waning. "We need to go. Now," she said, her voice trembling. The ship's engines sputtered to life, just enough to propel them through the collapsing structure. Debris rained down around them, but Arya guided the ship with unwavering focus. Ethan, still connected to the bond, lent her his strength, their shared energy keeping the ship aloft. The stronghold exploded in a blinding burst of light as they cleared the mountain range, the force of the blast propelling them into open sky. Silence followed, broken only by the faint hum of the ship's damaged systems. A new beginning. Ethan and Arya sat in the quiet cockpit, their bodies battered but alive. The bond between them pulsed faintly, a reminder of their shared survival. "It's over," Ethan said, his voice hoarse. "We did it." Arya smiled weakly, her golden eyes meeting his. "For now. But the hunter's influence extends beyond this system. They will return." Ethan leaned back, exhaustion and determination mixing in his gaze. "Then we'll be ready. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." The ship drifted through the endless expanse of space, a faint glow emanating from its core. It was damaged, but alive, like its pilots, and somewhere in the vast galaxy, new threats stirred, waiting for their moment. But for now, Ethan and Arya had won. And they weren't just survivors anymore. They were a force to be reckoned with.